Hello and welcome to another edition of Mailbag. What is Mailbag? Well, Mailbag is a feature of the channel where you guys leave lots of comments on the channel and I attempt to answer those comments, or if I can't answer those comments, I throw it out to you guys who have more knowledge on some of this stuff than I do. So let's get into the first mailbag of this session. Remember, like, comment, subscribe to the channel. Go over to Instagram and follow me there. Go over to Facebook, follow me there. That's where the normal notices are. And consider becoming a Patreon. Next comment or question comes from Walter Galindo. And that's in response to Kronos. These are a few of my favourite things. Korg M3, what do you think? A mailbag I did in January 2023. And Walter writes, the M3 is a transitional keyboard, very much like the Nautilus. It is refined from over what the Triton was used, but not quite the next generational step of the Kronos. If the question was M3 versus brand new Chrome EX, to be honest, it's no contest. The M3 is far more capable than it, even though the MEX is still in production. If I were on the market for a budget for a Nautilus, I'd go with that, even knowing the Kronos is more keyboard and the list is far too long to post. But since it's out of production, you only find one used, and the question comes from somebody who sounds like it's not a synth gearhead. So I'd advise against any kind of issues relating to user board that can become temperamental, or go for the Nautilus. Interesting views, very good views. Now, even though you said the M3 was a transitional design phase, it was the next keyboard in the Korg music workstation line. However, at launch there was a new kid on the block, and that kid was called Oasis. So the comparison with the Chrome is interesting, and you would still take the M3 over Chrome. I agree the Chrome EX is still capable workstation, but I've heard that this product is also about to become end of life. Now, if you're using an instrument for income generation, there is a decision point that says buy new and supported, as opposed to buy old and unsupported. Many people I know have contacted me about the Kronos and have stated that they have been into the second-hand market and bought a second unit to ensure that they can maintain their income stream, even in the event of a failure. But if you had to buy new, then the Nautilus really from Korg is your only option if you wanted functionality like Kronos. Unless you were basically going to swap to another manufacturer and another workstation environment. And to be honest, I know from comments recently a number of you have. Next comment or question comes from Yokada. This one was in response to Phantom 8 has a PH4 keyboard, and last of the Cigar Fat Cats, a mailbag I did in February 2023. And Yokada writes, hi John, hope all is well. Well, it's getting there, shall we say that. As a vintage synth repair vet, I thought you might have some thoughts or advice. My beloved D-50 has some dead velocity keys recently. Has happened every couple of years. I've successfully cleaned with no problem. I've had time over the Christmas break, so I did it again. Last full clean of the contacts was probably 2018 or 2019. However, it wasn't successful this time. I started with the 2 problem keys. They were fixed, but I've now had 5 new problem keys to varying degrees. I told a tech-savvy friend about this, and they should have only cleaned the problem contacts with isopropyl alcohol. Ideally, you use a little isopropyl alcohol as possible, as it can wear the carbon on the contacts. So I've unwittingly damaged my D-50. Would you recommend any resellers of D-50 keyboard parts, or any other advice would be highly appreciated, as I hate for the D50 to effectively just become an oversized sound module. Thanks in advance, Ross. Actually, I'll tell you what was really interesting, and if I can remember when I actually post this video, I'll do a link to this. But I've just done a keyboard rebuild on a JX-3P, and there were a number of things that I think I put into that, which I think was part 6, 7 and 8, it might have been 7, 8 and 9, I can't remember, where I actually took the keyboard to pieces and I rebuilt the keyboard, and I went through a whole number of things here. But the service tech does raise a very important point. There is no need to clean the contacts unless they are actually full of dust and grime. And normally the first time I strip the keyboard down, that works this way, I will clean the board. But I tend to use soapy water. I don't tend to use IPA. You would be surprised actually how much crap you can get off a circuit board just by using soapy water, and possibly a very light use of one of those scouring pads, you know, the ones that sponge one side and have a slightly abrasive side the other side. You don't want to really pummel the keyboard, you just want to brush the keyboard, and it takes a lot of the grime and crap off a keyboard where it's got underneath the contacts. And a lot of times that is really all that's necessary. Now what I then tend to do is, if it's the first time I've been inside the keyboard, I then look at the keypads themselves. And I'm looking at the graphite keypads, and what I'm looking to see is if the graphite is still intact. And if the graphite is intact, whether there's still a decent degree of thickness on the graphite. Now quite often the way they do this is effectively they run the circuit board through a machine that actually glues, for want of a better word, the graphite onto the key. I suppose it prints it onto the circuit board. You know, it just goes through a machine. It goes drop, 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 and prints it, and then it's effectively glued onto the electrical contact. That's how it works. So, you know, rubbing it with isopropyl alcohol, you are going to take off, you know, a layer of graphite. The point I made in the video that on the JX-3P that I've just done is there is a requirement to rub very lightly to take off any surface imperfections on both the pad and the contact. So in a Roland keyboard, quite often the contact is a rubber strip. Some other keyboards use other mechanisms. But the bottom line is, what you're trying to do is just get the dirt and grime off, which is a very light rubbing. You don't want to be going in like like you're scrubbing it, because that will degrade the contact. Anyway, the thing is about this scenario is not all is lost, and I responded that you can actually get products like graphite based paint, and what you need to do is get a very, very fine point brush, and then you can effectively paint the paint onto the contact. You will need to be careful you don't paint over the gap between the contact, because these things have, you know, a north and south or east and west depending on how the thing is orientated. But you can actually re-graphite those contacts, and other people have used methods like using an HB pencil, or a 2B pencil actually, because you don't want it more hard, you want it more broad, more B than H. So a 2B pencil, and they just colour in the contacts to put a layer of graphite, because effectively that's all a pencil is, it's a layer of graphite. Don't use coloured pencils, by the way. So the other thing is to say, you know, make sure the contact strip, however it's, you know, the keys are making contact with something to make contact with the electrical board, make sure that's also cleaned. But you could actually bring this back to life. In the event it's a complete failure, there are very many, I mean, eBay, there's people on eBay selling a contact board, and I've just come up lucky on another keyboard. I've got a keyboard in pieces at the moment, where I've been looking for probably the last 2 years, I suppose, for a new circuit board, and failed. So I tried to repair the old one. That hasn't gone particularly well. It kind of works, but it doesn't work if that gets you. Everybody understands that. So what I've tended to do is I saw this come up, so I just bought another keyboard. I will clean it, and I will install that instead, and then try and repair the one that's there, and keep it as a secondary keyboard or secondary circuit, just in case it goes wrong in the future. I'm hoping that actually made a lot of sense and you can restore your D-50.